Welcome back to What to Do When, and today we are doing something very outside the comfort zone. We're in an amazing podcast recording studio and it's very exciting, and I'm also so incredibly nervous to even be here. I'm looking at these cameras, I'm feeling overwhelmed, but I know that it's going to be awesome and amazing and is absolutely the right choice. And to give you a bit of insight as to why I decided to do this, is I watched this reel or something on Instagram a couple of weeks ago, and it has been ruminating in my head for such a long time. And it was something along the lines of, if somebody followed you around for a week, would they believe that you're going after your dreams, that you're going to achieve the dreams that you have? And did it hit me like a knife to the heart? And it's been haunting me ever since. And it's really, at first I felt a lot of shame that maybe I hadn't been doing and following up on some of the things that I really, really, really want and prioritizing some of those things. And then I started shifting out of the shame and going, okay, well, obviously that reminder came into my world for a reason, and now it's up to me to do something. This podcast is a huge dream of mine. I dream that it could be huge one day and that it could reach the ears of so many people, because I know how lovely, important, and just welcoming it is to have conversations like this that we have here on this podcast, where we're not talking about being perfect, where we're owning how hard it is to be here and to be human, where we're talking about the messy middle bits where we're going through it. We haven't quite made it to the other side. We want to get there, but we're still in that messy middle. This podcast is about being on the ground floor with you. And so I invite you now to be here on the ground floor with me as we take our dreams a little bit more seriously and step it up a bit. So let's dive into this episode. We're in for a really, really good one. And this is what to do when you're an overthinker who does not trust yourself. I want you to picture this. I want you to close your eyes and picture a decision that you have to make. Maybe you're dating two guys. Maybe you've been offered two amazing jobs. Maybe you're deciding between two holiday destinations. Maybe it's even a simple decision of where you want to go to dinner. I don't know. But you're getting to that point where you know that you need to make a decision. And instead of being able to walk through that decision with ease and being able to trust yourself, you're overthinking every single moment. You're stuck in indecision. You're worried about making the wrong choices. Your stomach is in freaking knots. Your throat is closing up. And this decision feels like there's a right choice and a wrong choice. And as an overthinker, if you don't trust yourself, this is probably a really common experience for you. From the biggest things like who you're going to choose as a partner, jobs, opportunities, where you want to live, and the smaller things like where you want to go to dinner. This is a tough place to be. So this episode is not for you if you are someone who is great at making decisions, who is empowered, who is just goes after what they want like that. This episode is not for you, my friend. You can move on. You're doing great. This episode is for those people that overthink every freaking decision that they make and struggle with it. You want to be someone who is more decisive and who just trusts and backs their decisions more, instead of looking to ChatGPT, asking every single friend and all the group chats that you have under the sun, your nail tech, the bartender, what they think you should do. You want to be someone who makes these decisions for yourself and backs yourself. And you want to feel good in those decisions, knowing that there is no right and no wrong, and there's no way that you can F up something that is actually meant for you. That's what this episode is about. So let's break it down. Why is self-trust so hard for overthinkers? If we break this down, we're really looking at your upbringing. We're looking at those moments in your life, usually from the ages of about 0 to 14. We're looking at those prime moments where you learnt what decision-making looks like, how you make decisions, how other people make decisions, and if you're trustworthy or not. If you grew up in a household where you had perhaps an anxious parent, or maybe you had a parent themselves that was an overthinker and that struggled with decision makings. Maybe you grew up with a parent that pressured you. Maybe you grew up in an environment where you weren't given time and space to sit with what feels right for you. Or maybe you had all the decisions made for you. Maybe you felt like you never had a choice. And so when it comes down to it, being an adult and getting to that point where you realize I'm in charge of my own life and I'm the only one making the decisions here, it can feel like a lot of pressure. It can feel like you're going to get it wrong. Overthinking is a symptom of a lack of control. Overthinking is something that so many of us who struggle with anxiety, myself included, overthinking is a massive symptom of anxiety and a lack of control. The overthinking is actually about trying to regain a semblance of control whilst also stopping you from making any decisions in the first place. So I want you to think back. I want you to think back to what was it like when you were younger, right? Think about decisions for, things at school, your extracurriculars, what classes you wanted to join. Think about what were decisions like for you as a young person. In your youth, growing up, what were decisions like? How were they treated? How were they supported? Were you encouraged and given a choice in your decisions? Were you encouraged that there wasn't a right and a wrong? Were you encouraged to take time to sit with how you really feel? Or were you encouraged to maybe walk the path that your siblings or your parents walked before you? Maybe you were pressured to make decisions quickly. Maybe you were told that you were too sensitive, that you took too long to decide, and maybe those decisions were taken away from you. Those first 7 years of our life shape so much of the brain that we deal with today as an adult. And this is why it's so important to reflect on, especially if you're an overthinker and you're struggling with decisions. Maybe you have a decision that you need to be making in your life, or maybe your whole freaking life has just been one big mess of struggling to make decisions and trust yourself. This is why it's important to reflect. This is why it's important to reflect and think back and think, what is my blueprint for self-trust? In those first 7 years, you're developing a blueprint for you, how you see yourself, how you see the world, how you make decisions, how much you believe in yourself, what you're capable of. That blueprint is something that you use every single day. Automatically, without even realizing, you're jumping and using that blueprint. This is why the self-awareness work and reflection work is so important. So don't shy away from this moment. I know that sometimes it can also be really hard because we don't remember. Often we don't remember those moments, but I want you to actually think about now a decision that you had to make in your childhood or in your teenage years. And I want you to think about what that decision-making process was like and what messages you received about making decisions and about that process. Really, really have a think about it now. And now I also invite you to think about a decision that you made in your adult life, a decision that you had to make recently. If you're an overthinker who struggles to trust themselves, think about this. Think about a decision that you made previously. And I want you to think about what that process was like. I want you to think about what was your internal narration during that process. Was it take your time, slow down, think about what's important to you? Or was it a sense of pressure, rushing, you need to get this right? This will give you, especially if you struggle to remember your experiences when you were younger, this will give you some insight as to what that blueprint you have for decision making and self-trust is like in your brain. And remember that if you're an overthinker who is struggling to trust themselves, which you are because you're here and you're listening or watching this episode, you likely have this wound of self-trust that you're carrying. And all these moments in our adult lives, so yes, our childhood experiences create that blueprint, they create that wound, but then what happens is in our adult lives, all our experiences reinforce that. They reinforce that blueprint to become stronger and stronger. They make that wound deeper and deeper. And what happens is every time that you get told you're too sensitive or you take too long to decide, or maybe the decision that you made, this is a tough one, maybe the decision that you made didn't end you in the best place. Maybe it did feel like a wrong decision. Maybe that's been your story about it afterwards. Maybe you have really big regrets about your life. And that's a really tough place to be because it's going to hit on that self-trust wound every single time. It's going to scratch at that wound. It's going to hit home. And for you, this is why it's really important to remember to be kind and compassionate to yourself. If you're first time listening to this podcast, welcome. If you're not, you know how much I preach about how important the self-talk you have to yourself inside your own head is. And this is not something that a lot of us like to talk about or like to acknowledge. I talk to myself in my own head all the time, constantly. I am the constant in my head. And that voice and the way that I speak to myself has the ability to impact my mood, how I feel, and then what decisions I make and what choices I make. If that voice in your head right, is something maybe like what you experienced when you were younger. Maybe it was the pressure to make decisions. Maybe there was no time for your big emotions and you were rushed into making decisions, or perhaps the decision was taken away for you and you lived a life based on what somebody else wanted, or what you thought somebody would love you for, or what you thought meant that you would be successful in another's eyes. If that voice is like that in your head, it's going to be really, really, really hard to make decisions where you back yourself. Really hard. Doing work on the voice in your head and shifting it to be more kind and compassionate is the single-handedly greatest thing I have ever done for my mental health in my entire life. I have made some pretty messed up decisions in my life. I have to own it. Though there are no wrong decisions, and those decisions got me to where I am today, there's still decisions that I probably would change if I got given a choice, because they led me down a road that was super painful. And for a long time, I lived with that sense of regret, and I lived with a sense of shame about the choices that I made. And I chose to create the narrative and the story that I make bad decisions, that I can't trust myself. Think about the implications in your life of being somebody who can't trust themselves. Have a think about the people that you know in your life. Think about the people that you admire. Think about the people that you look up to. The thing that they all have in common is that they trust themselves and they like themselves. They back themselves. They also are human and they know that they're going to get it wrong sometimes, and that's part of the journey of growth. Often it's actually not about the decisions we make. It's about what we do afterwards. It's about what we do in those hard moments where we feel like we've gotten it wrong. Do we go down that road of shaming ourselves, of berating ourselves, of living with that deep, heavy sense of regret? Or do you pick yourself back up? Do you give yourself that kindness and that compassion? And do you support yourself in getting what you need in order to be able to move forward and make different decisions in the future? Now let's talk about overthinking. Let's break down what is overthinking and why the frick do we do it. Overthinking is a part of you that we call a protective part. So if you don't know, I work in parts work, or parts theory. And that means that there are different parts of your psyche that are born during times of trauma, pain, toughness in your life, and they're born as different parts of your psyche. So if you have a little think about, again, making a decision in your life, right? It often sometimes feels like we have one part of us that wants one thing and we have another part that wants another. Let's say you're dating two amazing men and one's a bit more dangerous and one's a little bit more safe. And you might have those sort of two parts of you, one who's saying, go for the fun, go for the sexiness, go for the danger. One that's then saying, go for the safety, go for the comfort, go for the one that feels predictable. Those are two examples of two different parts of you. One category of parts that we work with a lot, and that are usually all of our coping mechanisms that we use to deal with pain or fears or trouble, we call them our protective parts. So I want you to think about these parts of you being like a security guard, this big buff security guard standing in front of a cell and protecting all the parts of you that have experienced real pain in your life. Those parts that are protected and hidden away are called your vulnerable parts. So they might be the parts of you that experience real trauma in your life. They might be parts that carry abandonment wounds, things like guilt wounds or neglect. They all live inside a cage, and you have protective parts. Again, think about big, hulky security guards standing outside, and they're the ones that hold the key to opening up those parts of you that feel more pain. They're standing in front of that. They're standing in front of this cage, and they are doing everything in their possible power to stop your pain from being re-experienced or felt. So that heartbreak that you felt from, maybe your parent walking out when you were young, that devastation, maybe the pain or the grief that you felt if someone passed away, whatever it might be, that's all locked away in a cage in order to never be felt again or experienced again. And you have these protective parts standing in front of it, doing everything in their possible freaking power to stop that from happening again. And so those protective parts then develop these coping mechanisms. They develop ways to stop us from feeling or re-experiencing pain that we felt before, that ripped us apart the first time. and we never want to feel it again. Overthinking is one of those protective parts. And overthinking isn't because you're weak, it's because there is this part of you that is trying to protect you from something, from pain, from your past pain that you have actually lived and you have actually experienced. And overthinking is one of those things that can keep a lot of our pain at bay. Even though it's a painful thing in itself, it's a pain that you know. And it's something that I personally use and rely on a lot. Overthinking happens so much for me. It's caused me a lot of freaking havoc, but I also know that it's a really, really big protective part of myself that doesn't want me to make wrong choices. So you might have your own versions of protective parts. You could have a perfectionist part that wants to make sure that you get it right and that you don't get it wrong again. You might have a critic part who wants you to improve so often that you never get criticized again. You might have an avoidant part who just wants to keep you from failing, so they stop you from even trying in the first place. So those are some examples of what protective parts might look like for you. And each one of those parts, if we're talking about a perfectionist part, if we're talking about a critical part, or if we're talking about an avoidant part, they could all use that strategy of overthinking to stop you from trying in the first place. These parts mean well, and they want to protect you, right? They want to protect you from something. Your job is to find out what that something is, to find out what experiences in your past are being constantly projected into your future. What are you actually afraid of? Are you afraid of judgment? Have you been judged in the past? Are you afraid of criticism? Are you afraid of being outcast? Are you afraid of being laughed at? Are you afraid of getting it wrong? Are you afraid of the consequences of your decisions? What are you actually afraid of? And this is something that overthinking stops us from being able to really look at. Ruminating and overthinking, you might have heard the word ruminating before, but ruminating and overthinking, which is just meaning that you're up in your own head and you're thinking through things. You might be making pro and cons lists in your head. You might be thinking about different scenarios or different paths. It gives you the illusion that you're doing something, right? The hardest thing for an overthinker who doesn't trust themselves is to actually do something. And overthinking is protective because it gives you the illusion that you're doing something. It gives your brain something to do and a problem to solve, and it gives you a little dopamine hit. It's almost like you're doing a little Sudoku puzzle in your head, and your brain is thinking, yes, we're doing things, we're problem solving, we're working it out. But that overthinking, in a sense, can be really overwhelming, and you end up doing nothing at all. So this is what overthinking is about. And if this is something that keeps coming up for you, I want to give you one of my favorite tools to use, and it's extremely basic in its sense, but I guarantee if you start doing this and if you find a way to do it in your way, you will successfully stop yourself from overthinking, bring yourself back to the present, and get yourself to engage in those important questions about decision making and trusting yourself to make decisions in your life about what's really important to you, where you want to be and where you want to go. This is what I call a sense reset. When we're overthinking, we're going into a part of our brain that is actually in the past, and it's switching off your access to the present moment. A sense reset can be super helpful for your nervous system because instead of going into that sense of danger or fight or flight and thinking you've got to solve this massive crazy problem inside your head, when you do the sense reset activity, you'll bring yourself back to the present, you'll calm your nervous system down, you'll be able to engage in what's right here in front of you instead of getting stuck in your own head in fantasy land where it feels like you're doing something, but if we're honest, you're not actually doing anything at all, right? So a sense reset is about your senses. It is as simple as changing your environment, changing your temperature, changing what you're doing. My favorite version of this at the moment, I have been dating and I am someone who has an anxious attachment style. And in this dating process, boy, has my anxious attachment style been freaking triggered over and over and over again, waiting for people to text back, waiting to know what they say, letting people down gently, getting just all these sorts of things that have just been so honestly so difficult and so frustrating for my poor little anxious parts. And so I've been doing the sense reset constantly. Sense reset for me looks like, if I can, vigorously shaking my body. So for me, I will literally start, when I feel that overthinking starting to jump in, and I start to feel, overthinking comes with anxiety. For me, it might be for you too. I literally will jump up, and even if the only thing I can shake is my hands, I'll shake my hands out. I'll jump up and I'll move around. The other ways you can do the sense reset in ways that maybe don't look as wild as that is going and washing your hands under really cold or really warm water, changing that temperature, or even just going outside and freaking getting some fresh air. Change something to your senses, okay? That's what the sense reset is about. Anything that shifts your sensory experience, okay? It is the way that we can engage back in presence instead of getting stuck in your head. It's a way to bring you back into your body. And then you can sit with yourself and ask yourself those important questions. What's important to me? Instead of running to ChatGPT to ask them to make the decision for you, instead of running to your group chat, instead of running to your friends, instead of maybe running to your therapist, which is healthy, but they shouldn't be making decisions for you, you can come back, you can sit with that discomfort, and you can ask yourself, what's important to me? What is important to me? What do I feel? Where do I want to go? Building that capacity to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, right? If you're an overthinker who struggles to trust yourself, again, hopefully you are. That's the only reason why you should be here listening to this. You're likely someone who maybe doesn't even know what they want, who maybe has never even asked themselves what they want. And that's something that you get to look at. That's something that you get to inquire into within yourself. And I want to acknowledge how very, very, very uncomfortable it is to not know what you want. It is so uncomfortable because of the fact that your brain likes to have a plan. It likes to know what the frick you're doing. It likes to know which steps forward and what's the plan and what path you're taking. To sit there and actually say to yourself, I don't know what I want, is scary. It's really scary to many, many parts of you who are trying to have that sense of control again. Your job in that moment is to sit in that uncomfortable place, or go again, therapist, coach, counselor, get some support from someone that you trust in your life to help you sit in that uncomfortable space. Because in that uncomfortable space is your knowing and is your intuition. You probably look at people in your life who make decisions easily and who trust and who back themselves. And you can see that they are clearly connected to some level of gut knowing or intuition or whatever word you want to use. They're connected to that within themselves. They know and have access to something that you don't. And no matter why that has happened, no matter what experiences in their upbringing versus your upbringing that has led them to be that way and led you to not be that way, it doesn't mean that something's wrong with you, and it doesn't mean that something's right with them. What it does mean, though, is that you have a little bit of work to do on connecting with yourself in that moment, on unearthing your intuition, your sense of self, and what's really important to you. I am so grateful for all of the moments in which I have had no idea what the fuck I wanted, or what the fuck I thought I was doing, or what decision I was going to make. When I sat in those moments of indecision, when I sat in the moment of not knowing if I wanted to break up with this partner or stay with them, when I sat in the moments of not knowing whether I wanted to go and find my biological father or whether I didn't, sitting in those moments when I thought about quitting my job and doing starting study, doing all those different things, moving country, moving here to Australia, when I think about those moments where I felt so lost and so uncomfortable, they're some of the greatest, most incredible experiences and moments of my life that led me to grow and led me to change in a really, really positive way. They led me to realize that it's okay to not know what I'm doing, but it's also okay to take time and sit with what decisions feel right for me. I'm also now extremely grateful to have friends and family around me who now, instead of telling me what to do, will encourage me to explore what's within myself. This is why I love coaching and counseling as a modality within itself, because the decisions aren't about what somebody else thinks. Those sessions and those processes and all the ways that I work with my clients is about uncovering what they want and what's best for them, what's best for you. and sitting with them in that uncomfortable moment where you could start overthinking everything. You could go into panic or freeze or overwhelm. But instead, when you have that support, you can sit there in that moment and you can dig in. You can dig your heels in and you can ask some tough questions. And those moments are everything. Those moments will lead you to what is most important in your life. And as an overthinker who struggles with self-trust, you deserve to feel content and happy with your life and your decisions. Doing this within yourself can be really hard. And so I have created something for you that I'm hoping will really, really help if you are not in a place where you don't have people in your life to do this with you, or you're not in a place where you can work with a coach, a counselor, a therapist, or someone as a professional service. I've created what I call a parts mapping exercise for you. And this is a free downloadable 10 to 15 minute exercise that you can use to be able to sit in that moment of discomfort, to stop yourself outsourcing your decisions and to come back to you. Why I love parts work and why I use parts work with every single client is because I work with overthinkers. I work with anxious overthinkers every single day. And something that we all have in common is we have so many freaking different parts of ourselves that all want to go a different way or move in a different direction. And that internal conflict of one part of me wants to do this, one part of me wants to do this, one part of me is saying I want to do this. That conflict is so frustrating inside your own head. This parts mapping exercise, and why I love parts work, teaches you how to break that down. It gives you a process to be able to listen to and acknowledge all your parts and come back to harmony and come back to what's important to you to get back in touch with that. So there's a free download. I will put this in the show notes. Download it, listen to it, do the exercise, see if it helps. You really can't go wrong. Learning to trust yourself and becoming somebody who doesn't overthink as much and who trusts and backs themselves more, this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. And I want you to get the idea out of your head that being an overthinker is wrong. I am a living, breathing overthinker, going after my dreams, making awesome decisions that I'm proud of in my life, and being vulnerable in the process. I overthink things every single freaking day, but I constantly use all the tools that I teach and all of the supports that I can to be able to work through this. There is another way, and it's called sitting with yourself in discomfort. And this is why I created the program Heal. This is something in this moment that I'm actually struggling to pitch and to sell to you. I struggle and overthink selling my programs, my coaching, my courses. Sometimes it feels really hard, especially because I know how difficult and vulnerable it is to be stuck in that messy middle place where you don't know what you're doing, where you feel lost, where you feel confused. But I'm pushing past that right now. You might see it on my face right now. I'm pushing past that right now because I do want to share with you if this feels right for you. If you've maybe been listening to the podcast for a while, if you've been thinking about getting some support to work through the messy middle, to be able to learn these tools and these skills so that you can walk out into your life and do this for the rest of your life. If you know that now is the time, this is exactly why I created the program Heal. It is for those anxious overthinkers who want the support, not to have somebody tell them this is what you need to do and here's how you can get it right, but to actually learn how to do this yourself. And this is why I love coaching so much. This program is about the messy middle. This program is about learning to love yourself for who you are and learning to love yourself for being human. It's about learning to be with you and to show up as more of your authentic self in the world, more of the real you. It's about hiding less and living more. It's about taking more chances. It's about living and creating a life that you're proud of. And there's so much that goes into that. There's so much unpacking of your past, of the blueprints that have been created inside your brain for how you deal with the world and how you walk in the world. There's so much of that stuff to unpack, and there's also so much of it to learn to rewrite for you. If you're thinking about this, please head to the link in the show notes. You'll be able to learn more about Heal, and you'll also be able to book in a free connection call with me where we can talk one-on-one and we can see if this program is the right fit for you and where you want to be, or if there's something I would recommend for you that would suit you more. So I'm going to leave it there, and I really, really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and that you've had a few little nuggets to think about and a few things to try, particularly that parts mapping exercise, especially if there's a decision weighing heavily on you now, or if you find that your overthinking is just getting out of control. Please try that exercise. Please try the sense reset and share this episode with anyone that you think is going to get value from listening to it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.